Tonight, a former police officer under arrest and charged with manslaughter after a deadly shooting in Hartford's North End. In February, Joseph Magnano shot 55-year-old Stephen Jones. Magnano is now under arrest but free on bond. The Office of the Inspector General reviewed everything from witness statements to body cam video to evidence at the scene. News 8's Bob Wilson has a look at the details.
It took 2.5 months, but the report from the Office of the Inspector General has been released. They recommended that Officer Magnano be charged with first-degree manslaughter. And the prosecutor did just that.
He's a mess. He's looking at 1 to 20 years. Manslaughter 1 charge.
It happened in February. Police were called to Blue Hills Avenue for Stephen Jones, a suicidal man with a knife. The report shows blood on the ground where Jones cut himself before police arrived. Body cam shows 2 other police officers were trying to convince him to drop the knife and were making progress. Then Officer Joseph Magnano shows up.
Drop the knife!
In the report, Magnano says he feels Jones is getting too close to him, too close to the civilians, and he couldn't back up anymore because of his cruiser. He says Jones ignored multiple commands to drop the knife.
Drop it!
My heart goes out to the family of Stephen Jones. Even on days like today, I'm sure it is just another painful reminder of this story that led to this chapter.
The mayor fired Officer Magnano in March and says the investigation has been transparent and will now move over to the court system. The report states that Magnano was not dispatched to the scene, but drove there on his own, reaching speeds of 88 miles an hour.
To say that he wasn't dispatched, that he took the initiative to make sure that the community and his fellow officers were safe, nonsensical statement.
The Hartford mayor says the independent investigation moved swiftly, and today's arrest goes a long way to restoring the community's trust in the police department.
Response in the aftermath of this officer-involved shooting go very differently than previous ones, and I think it has restored some level of faith and trust.
The police union says the report, the arrest, it erodes morale amongst the rank and file. Says they're down 150 police officers, and recruiting will now be nearly impossible.
Morale's in the tank. I didn't think it could get worse. This is a nail in the coffin. I do not know how you're going to get police officers to come to this city now.
Attorney Ben Crump is representing Stephen Jones's family, and he put out a statement saying, quote, "The charging of this officer is a necessary and meaningful step towards accountability for Stevie Jones and his family. Stevie was in the middle of a mental health crisis," close quote. And Tuesday morning at 11:30, the NAACP, the family for Stephen Jones, as well as their attorney, will have their news conference, and Magnano will be in court on June 5th. In Hartford, Bob Wilson, News 8.
To all units, proceed to your post assignments. All units, proceed to your post assignments.
That's the sound of the police! Whoop, whoop. That's the sound of the beast!
Yeah, baby, it's episode 32 of Probable Cause on May 26, 2026. Jeff Norman and the FBI whistleblower Greg Dillon with you, as we always are, or almost always. We weren't on last week. Almost always on Tuesday nights. And our guest tonight is criminal defense attorney Frank Riccio, and we are going to talk about the Joseph Magnano case. I told you in my email, Frank, that Greg was a former Branford cop. He still lives in Connecticut. I'm also from Connecticut. I was born in New Haven and raised in North Haven. And so I'm very familiar with Channel 8. But I haven't watched it in many years because I've been away for many years. And I do not remember when I was there that the reporters doubled as some kind of band leaders or something. What was up with that guy, Bob Wilson, in that opening?
Bob Wilson has a look at the details.
It took 2.5 months, but the report from the Office of the Inspector General has been released. They recommend.
Is that against some Connecticut statute to dress like that in public?
I don't think so. You know, Bob has, and I don't know him personally, but I've watched Channel 8 for years, and that's sort of his shtick.
Oh, it is.
It is. So that wasn't just because of this case. Virtually every time you'll see him dressed similarly, he kind of gives the vibe that he's not your standard reporter.
I guess not. Well, this isn't your standard story, and we covered this, I guess, at the end of March. The shooting happened, I think, in February, and we had James Riccio on, who you saw in the opening. He's the head of the Hartford Police Union, and also Von Kleem, a use of force expert, and they were great. But you are a guy who is not attached to the case. You know, we thought of inviting Magnano's lawyer on, but Greg brought to my attention you won a case that made him think about you when you represented Brian North. Was that about 2 years ago?
Yes, the trial was March and April of 2024.
Yeah. Do you agree with Greg that there are parallels to that case?
More than you can imagine. There are many. Yes.
For example?
Well, where do we begin? In no particular order, I think that in trying to determine whether Officer Magnano acted criminally or not, and now we're looking at this sort of the criminal statute, this reckless manslaughter charge, there's this evaluation of whether he acted subjectively reasonable or objectively reasonable. Well, the objective reasonableness, improving what is objective reasonableness, very similar to what we did in the North cases, we have those who were in charge of training, those who were in charge of whether it's local or statewide training, to come in and to testify about these are how these officers are trained. Because it's not the reasonable person, it's the reasonable police officer. How would a reasonable police officer act or feel? As far as the subjective nature of it, much like in the Brian North case, Officer, now Sergeant North, testified about what he thought of and how he reacted. I thought it was very raw human emotion when I was watching the body cam, Officer Magnano's body cam, and immediately after he discharged his weapon, he screamed the F word.
Hey! Hey, drop the knife. Drop the knife. No, drop the knife. 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 Woman, you're gonna get shot. Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Drop it. Last time. Drop the knife. Drop it. Fuck. Fuck!
He said the F word twice. What's the significance of that, Frank?
Well, that goes to the subjective reasonableness, meaning this is what he was thinking. That response is that he didn't want to do that, but he felt compelled to do that. In fact, if you play that video for another 20 seconds or so, where Officer Magnano then gets in a vehicle, a police vehicle, and he was talking to another officer in that vehicle, he said words to the effect of, I didn't want to do it. My hand was forced. And I'm paraphrasing. That testimony is going to be extraordinarily important because it gives the subjective reasonableness. Why did Officer Magnano act the way that he did? And I think that, and I'm not certainly an expert in any way into police officer training, but I think that given the right witness to come in and testify about training, you're going to hear things from walking backwards and whether or not that was the right idea and how far you should walk backwards, how many shots should be discharged. I know in the North case, and here's another parallel, in the North case, there was a lot of criticism at first about how Officer North had discharged his weapon 7 times. And that was one of the main issues in the in the prosecution, where the Inspector General said, that's not reasonable. Well, if you focus on how these officers are trained with weapons, it's absolutely reasonable. The prosecutor in that case, for example, was trying to assert that you should fire once, stop, assess the situation, then fire again. How do you do that in real time? You can't do that in real time. And much like Officer North, who the defense was he was acting in self-defense of others, here too you have a gentleman who was walking down the street faster than originally prior to Officer Magnano's arrival. He was walking a little bit slower. But let's not think about what the other officers were thinking of. You have to think about and assess, what did Officer Magnano think and see? Now, I believe, and again, I'm not the lawyer, I don't know all the evidence, but I believe the radio communications were such that he knew that the tasers had been deployed and ineffective. So then he shows up, and you have to assess what he observed. He observed a man with a large knife walking at a relatively fast clip down the street there were a lot of people around. Other body cams showed that there were not only other police officers, but there were civilians there too.
Right.
Many of them, I would say, in arm's length of this gentleman with the knife. So these are the issues that Officer Magnano, in a split second, has to assess in real time.
All right. Before we get into some of the nuances, since you mentioned the wider environment there and the bystanders, here's another clip. This was shot by a bystander on a cell phone, so this will give you a sense of what Frank was just alluding to.
Think about it. Do not.
I have the impression at least some of these people knew him
Stevie,
by the way they were talking to him.
You need help, man.
All right, I'll bring the volume down because I don't think anything significant is said. But
you're absolutely right. There were many people, many civilians calling him by name. And I noticed too that one or more of the police officers were calling him by name as well to try to sort of establish some sort of a rapport with him too.
Oh yeah, when we did the previous episode, we actually talked for a few minutes about the female cop in particular. I don't have that clip here, but she was calling him Hun and Stevie, and we were saying that's really a nice touch to try to be relatable. And at the same time, she was warning one of her colleagues to step away a bit. She really had a lot of poise. You know what I'm talking about? Did you see that body cam?
100%. Yeah, I watched hers. I watched pretty much every body cam that was available in the IG's report. She did show a lot of poise. And on that point, I do want to point out that obviously the focus is on Officer Magnano and whether he acted reasonably. And he's the only one that's been charged. He's the only one that's on trial. But I think in trying to determine whether his actions were reasonable, you also have to evaluate the actions of the other officers and whether what they did was reasonable. I'm not here saying they did anything wrong. I'm just saying that you have to see whether or not they acted appropriately as well.
All right. Now, you mentioned him showing up after them. I think it's worth pointing out because I think most of our audience doesn't necessarily know all the details of this. So it's worth pointing out that he wasn't called to the scene. He was on duty, right, Greg?
Yes.
Yeah. But how often does that happen in general when something happens and the dispatcher sends officers to a scene? How often does it happen that other officers on their own decide to show up?
Oftentimes, because they'll clear the air when they have a situation that is that dangerous. And so they may not start dispatching additional units because they don't want to tie up the air. So it's not unusual for officers that are in the vicinity to start heading that way or respond directly to the scene. Again, in an effort to keep the airway clear for those officers on the scene, they don't want to have a lot of chatter going back and forth about who's responding, what their location is, what their ETA is, that type of a thing. So that's understandable under the circumstances. They want a clear air channel in case something goes wrong quickly.
All right, so here's a guy, I don't know if he's a community activist or if he's just some guy that one of the TV news stations got on camera, and he's referring to Magnano as, like a Rambo type because he just showed up, and whereas the others were much calmer, he, was there only a few seconds and then shot Stevie Jones.
It's under control, and then Rambo cop comes up, Wild Wild West, Wyatt Earp comes up and just bang, 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 bang.
So is there any credence to his point of view there?
I mean, listen, did Officer Magnano come in a little hot? He came in a little hotter than the female officer who we were just speaking of, who was dealing with it with him, the Mr. Jones, very calmly. That being said, he still shouted orders to drop the knife multiple times. He shouted, "This is the last time," or "last time, drop the knife." So it's sort of this suggestion that he got out of his car and just started firing his gun. That's not what happened. Now, Officer Magnano was there for a fraction of time from what the other officers were there for. But Listen, I think in the heat of the moment, that's what people perceived, but that's not, again, if you review it, the camera footage just once, that's not what he did. He came out of the car, he approached Mr. Jones, shouted orders, and then we know what happened after that. So it wasn't a split second thing.
Now, Greg, when we were talking on the phone earlier, you commented that it's not standard procedure for the cop to just show up without also radioing into the dispatcher to say so. Can you say a little bit about that?
Well, that's true, Jeff. But as I thought about it a little bit more, and I listened to the, I reviewed the tapes again. His not broadcasting the fact that he's about to arrive has more to do with the fact that they're trying to keep the air open in case they have to call for an ambulance, and in case something really bad happens. So they don't want to clutter the airway with a bunch of transmissions about who's going to arrive when and who's located where and what their ETA is. You have to keep the channel open, and that's why you don't hear much radio traffic going on during that time. Frank, I wanted to share with you something that Von Klein opened my eyes to, and I never thought about it, and I never heard anyone else other than Von Klein ever explain it in this way. But he had the insight that the body cam footage or the body camera angle is not necessarily what the officer is also seeing, because the body camera is facing forward. And if Officer Magnano, and I don't know this for a fact, but if he has to turn his head left and right to constantly evaluate where he is in relation to civilians, where he is in relation to his car, which he knows is behind him, we're not seeing any of that. And it plays a factor because he can be distracted by the fact that he knows there's civilians behind him, that he's backing up, and he's getting closer to them. But we don't get that impression because the body camera faces forward for the entire scene. Yeah. And I thought it was very, very insightful of Von Klein, because I never heard anyone explain it.
Yeah, it seems so obvious, but we didn't think of it. Yeah.
No, I've never heard anybody ever mention beside him.
Yeah.
And I have to say, and you're going to hear me say Brian North many times during this, but in the Brian North trial, that very issue came up.
Mm-hmm.
Officer North's body cam, as all body cam is below your eye line, below your sight line. And so there was a lot of questioning about what was it that Officer North really saw, and did he see what his testimony claims he saw? It was through the training officer and through Officer North, that very issue, which is, look, that's a sort of a straightforward view. You can't see on either side, and it's lower than what your eye line even sees. So correct. That was a huge part of the North case as well.
Greg, do you have something specific in mind as to how that was relevant with the Magnano shooting?
Yes, because he has to be aware of his surroundings. He can't just focus exclusively on what's in front of him. So if he's backing up and he either senses, hears, or sees civilians out of the sides of his eyes, that at some point, if he keeps backing up, they're going to be on the side or in front of him. And he only has a short window of opportunity to address that, because once the civilians are now alongside him or in front of him, the whole scenario changes drastically, because now the knife is closer to these people than ever. And you can't undo that unless the civilians are smart enough to start running away. And he knows his police car is behind him. So at some point he may very well back into it. And now he's in a really tough spot because he has somebody advancing toward him with a deadly weapon, and he now has restricted movement as to where he can go.
All right, but I have another clip, and I don't think this helps Magnano at all. And as we heard in the opening, it's like what you just said, one of his defenses is that, or what he said in the police report, is that he was worried about backing into the cruiser. He was running out of space, and that's why he fired the shots. This clip, I think, reveals that he was not at all close to his cruiser.
Regardless, Jeff, if he feels that he's getting closer to it, he can't completely turn around to see where it is. But if he has the sense that he's running out of space, it's going to influence his decision.
All right, well, let's look at it, and then we can talk about what he might have sensed as opposed to what we see. And of course, we're not under stress right now. That's fair to point that out.
Stevie, Magnano.
Drop the knife!
Stevie,
Drop the
you
knife!
gotta drop it.
Last time!
Stevie,
Drop the knife!
drop it.
Drop it!
Now, at the beginning of that clip, it sounds to me like it's one of the cops, maybe the one whose body cam footage we're watching. He says, Magnano, as in maybe he means don't shoot. I mean, I don't know for sure, but maybe one of you guys have a take on that. So let's watch that again. The female officer, I think that is, next to Magnano, is actually more in jeopardy of running out of space because she's got the vehicle right next to her. He doesn't have anything next to him, and the one behind him is quite a distance. Let's look at that again.
Stevie, Magnano.
Drop the knife!
Stevie,
Drop the
you
knife!
gotta drop it.
Last time!
Stevie,
Drop the knife!
drop it.
Drop it!
Magnano,
Drop the knife!
I mean, I have no dog in the fight, but I think it's fair to point that out. What do you guys have to say now that you saw that? Have you seen this angle before?
I've seen the angle, and so I think a couple things here. And again, this is going to really come down to obviously if it goes to trial, what the jury feels, but also what Officer Magnano felt. But a couple things to point out. He's now backing. First of all, he's going backwards. He really doesn't know what's behind him realistically, but he's moving backwards into an intersection closer to many civilians. I mean, there certainly seems to be more civilians behind him than in front of him. So there's these questions about what's behind him, who's behind him. Maybe his vehicle, his car rather, was not immediately behind him. But at the time that the gun was fired, that vehicle, which is up to our left in this image, was close to him. Maybe he felt he was getting dangerously close to that vehicle. Maybe not directly behind him, but it was close to his right hip. So these are the things that will have to be determined, whether entering that intersection, whether getting closer to these civilians that he doesn't know who are screaming, whether that played a role in this very high stress situation.
Right. But the thing is, the argument against him, the people who are saying what he did is illegal, he shouldn't have shot, however they're putting it, what they're saying is none of the other officers did. And then the counter argument to that is, well, he was only coming at Magnano, not the others, and Magnano had the cruiser right behind him. Here we see, he's not really, depending on the angle, I guess he's coming at Magnano a little bit more than the female officer, but she's pretty close.
Who's to say that what the other officers were doing was correct?
Correct. Thank you, Frank.
That's a good point.
Because I'm no expert, but you may hear or determine through expert testimony that the other officers essentially didn't take action when they should have. I mean, you have a man who's clearly going through a severe mental health episode, walking around with a large knife in public, getting dangerously close to these other officers. There was one officer that he seemed like he was a pace away from. So I had said that earlier, and I think this is going to be very important. If the defense or the prosecutor's statement is, well, the other officers did the right thing, Magnano did the wrong thing, well, why can't it be the other way around? And I'm not here to say that's true.
But it's a consideration. No, that's a good.
Absolutely.
Jeff, I do want to make mention of the fact that in the arrest warrant, which I thought was relatively short for such a serious incident, mention is made that he carried but did not deploy his OC spray, his pepper spray. And I have a number of issues with that because, first of all, that is really not the right thing to be deploying in an open air situation. Either because you have to probably be within 3 to 5 feet for it to be effective, which is far too close to get to that person who has a knife. So that's number one. Number two, when you're in an open air situation, the breeze can carry that in any direction, including back toward you, or the officers that are on either side of you or behind him. So to even suggest that, I think, was almost improper. because it wasn't the appropriate response under those conditions. The OC spray is very good if you are up close with someone who is unarmed and they are violently resisting or even mildly resisting. But under these circumstances, a use of force expert is going to say absolutely not under those conditions. Number two, the warrant faults him, Magnano, for not using his pepper spray, but doesn't ever address the other officers that were there for 3 minutes or 4 minutes prior, who are also carrying pepper spray and never thought to deploy it.
Yeah, that requires an explanation. That's a discrepancy. So here's a comment that I don't agree with respect to the fake certainty this person is asserting, but it is a question I was going to ask, not in the context of being a Monday morning quarterback, but just asking if it's something that possibly could be effective in a situation like this. Maybe it's hard to hit the legs.
Okay.
Would it potentially be useful? Let me finish. So would it potentially be useful, like to disorient him, and then that would enable the cops to jump on him or something like that? Is that
the shooting of legs or the shooting of shoulders or shooting the knife out of his hand? It's all utter nonsense. No police department that I've ever heard of trains their officers to do anything other than shoot for center mass. Shooting at the legs is going to, in that situation, is going to definitely cause ricochets off the pavement into bystanders, into other police officers.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not a guarantee that it's going to stop the person, number one, because it's not an easy target to hit. And number two, you can hit someone in the leg and they could die within 90 seconds because it hits the femoral artery and they'll bleed out before they can get an ambulance there. So that whole notion should be dismissed and ignored.
All right. Kathleen Welsh is very passionately defending Magnano. So I think we can read between the lines. You didn't say it explicitly, Frank, but let me just ask you, I guess it's pretty obvious you think it was a lawful shooting.
Based upon the Brian North case and all the study I did with that case, and I think that the Inspector General is going to have a difficult time proving its case. Again, I don't know all the evidence, certainly not. Right. And there's a long road on that case, but there are many parallels to that North case, and I think that they're going to have a tough time.
Frank,
there was something in the. I just want to mention what you found in the Inspector General's report, since Frank mentioned it. Greg called this to my attention, and he thinks it's odd and doesn't even belong in the report. Why don't you tell us what you have in mind, Greg, and maybe Frank has an opinion on it.
Sure. I mean, on page 3, there's a footnote in the IG's report, and this is what the information is in there. And I'm trying to think of why, under standards that make no mention in the statutes of race or even age coming into play, why would race even be mentioned in an IG's report?
That's a fantastic question. It doesn't belong in it. I mean, the IG, if he was here with us, would say, well, it's a fact. Okay.
Well, there's a lot of things that are facts, but they don't have any bearing on
right. It's a fact that I have 2 elbows, but that's not in the report.
I mean, it's a fact that it was winter when the shooting took place, but that doesn't have any bearing on what happened.
And here again, this sometimes is brought up for what reason. And again, I hearken back to the North case. When that case first came in, it was a white cop shooting a black man,
and also mentally ill.
And he was mentally ill. And actually, a lot of the parallels are amazing because the day before this incident, I'm sorry for the noise outside. The day before this incident,
baby, it's not exactly a rural area, is it?
It is not. The day before that incident, Mr. Suleiman, the victim in that case, had stolen a knife from the knife block of his girlfriend. So, and that was the knife that ended up being found in Mr. Suleiman's possession. The next day. But when that case came in, it was a white cop shooting a black man. And when I tell you, and Miss Walsh, who was, if it's the same Miss Walsh I know, she sat through that trial, she would tell you there was certainly at the very beginning such a white-black argument that race, they were trying, when I say they, it was mostly the media, but there was an injection of race in that case. And I lived that case for 3 years. Race had zero to do with that case.
Of course.
Zero.
Right.
Well, as Kathleen Walsh mentioned, Ben Crump is the attorney representing the family, and he's a race baiter, and Al Sharpton showed up at least once.
Race hustler.
Now, I don't know that justifies the Inspector General mentioning race in the report, but it just goes to show you that race is in the air.
I want to see the affiant of that IG report take the witness stand and explain before a jury why that information they felt needed to be included in the IG report.
It's a fair question. Here is Ben Crump, doing his thing where he's acting like he's a preacher as opposed to a lawyer, talking soberly like Frank is, and just the facts, ma'am. He's the opposite of just the facts, ma'am. And then also it goes right into Stevie Jones's sister saying a few words. It's really an emotional thing, tugging on the heartstrings, which is fine, but it doesn't have much to do with the law.
Stevie needed a helping hand, but yet the Hartford police gave him 9 bullet holes in his body. Y'all saw the video? He just unloaded the clip. I mean, it's a shame before God when you look at that video, how unnecessary, how unjustifiable, and how unconstitutional it was to kill a mental health patient who needed a helping hand.
He was just an amazing brother. As you can see, the picture, his smile tells a lot, and his eyes are the window to his soul. So he was a good brother.
So this is the backdrop to the whole situation.
I'm surprised they didn't bring out the picture of him in his graduation gown when he was in high school next.
And the attorney Crump, I mean, that's sort of his MO. It's making a lot of noise when it shouldn't be made. His sister sounds like certainly the much more calming influence. Listen, this is a tragedy. At the end of the day, we all can agree this is a terrible tragedy. There's no winners here. But and again, my at least analysis, at least at this point, from the little bit that I know, is that this Magnano case has nothing to do with race. It has to do with whether the police officer Magnano acted reasonably given the circumstances.
Frank, before we get
look, hold that thought. Look at this comment from Stefan. He always finds some way to annoy me. Why shouldn't 3 white men talk about it? How about saying what the 3 white men got wrong or something like that? But we don't have to be experts. If we have to be experts in everybody's culture, then hardly anybody's going to be able to comment on anything. All right, I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
No, Frank, I want to commend you for your defense of Brian North. Initially, when I was first reading the news reports and watching the video, I felt that was going to be a very, very difficult case to defend successfully. And I'm very impressed that you were able to do it. I think this case, actually, it would be easier to defend than the case that you were presented with. And so, kudos to you for being able to vigorously represent Trooper North.
Well, I appreciate that. And it was certainly a team effort. Officer North, and that came out in his testimony, you learned about him. He's a very calm guy who's very reasonable, he thinks intentionally, meaning he knows his training. He knows what he had to do. He's a professional, and that came across. I don't know Officer Magnano. I'm going to assume until I hear differently that he's the same type of a person. If so, then it may be a similar outcome. It was certainly, as you can imagine, it was a very tough case. I never had any doubt. And it was the right decision. And
well, you know, we have a clip of that since we keep referring to the Brian North case. So why don't we show folks a little bit from a news report about that so they know what we're talking about.
Multiple video clips taken from January 15th, 2020, the day 19-year-old Mubarak Suleiman was shot and killed after being chased by troopers.
Left lane, passing 40, speeds 80.
Initially, troopers were on I-95 South trying to stop Suleiman in a stolen car unsuccessfully. Prosecutors playing the dispatch call. Troopers followed Suleiman onto Campbell Ave in West Haven, where he crashed into another car, coming to a stop under the overpass.
I heard sirens that were getting louder and closer.
Jody Longley was pulled over that night, watching it all play out, her eyes on Suleiman in the driver's seat of the car.
I just saw him sitting there. And then, like I said, there's a lot of commotion. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. I can't make out what anybody was saying. There was a bunch of just yelling. And honestly, when I was looking, but like I said, everything happened quickly, I didn't see any movement.
Seen in the body camera video, Trooper North goes to the driver's side window of Suleiman's car with his gun drawn, while another trooper goes to the passenger side, all as a West Haven officer breaks the passenger side window. For a moment, North asked the other trooper to use a non-lethal weapon.
Jackson, go to taser! Taser!
Moments later, Trooper Jackson says he saw Suleiman reach for a knife. That's when North shot him. Trooper Jackson recalling it all in court.
He was holding it, had it in his hand at the, I guess you call it the grip of the knife, and he was moving it in a very threatening and aggressive manner, as if he was planning to do something with that knife.
Inspector General Robert Devlin Jr. questioning that so-called aggressive movement.
He's turned to the driver's side of the vehicle, correct?
He is making a motion
toward Trooper North, not toward you.
The defense following with this.
Someone could have been hurt with that knife.
Correct.
You could have been hurt with that knife.
Correct.
You could have been killed with that knife.
Correct.
This guy doesn't sound that believable, but on the other hand, I don't really understand why they're quibbling over how aggressively he grabbed the knife. I mean, chances are it wasn't to cut a piece of steak. Is this what the heart of the case was, whether or not he held the knife in an aggressive manner, or whether or not the police were close enough, or what was it?
After a almost 30-mile police chase, it ended under an overpass in West Haven. And the Mr. Suleiman acted as if he were dead. He laid motionless in his driver's seat. What you saw in the footage of the officers on either side was Officer North and the other officers were trying to get his attention to then tell him to drop the knife, get out of the car. When the window was being broken by the West Haven officer, that essentially woke up Mr. Suleiman. When the window broke, he pulled a knife and then went towards the officer on the right-hand side, the passenger side of the car. And that's when the gun was fired. So it was the knife did play a crucial role, because that was the knife that Trooper North was protecting the Officer Jackson from getting stabbed with.
What was the race of the victim?
And subsequently, that knife was then recovered and put on the front windshield.
What was the race of the guy who got shot?
Well, Mr. Suleiman was an African American.
Okay. Was race a big deal in this trial?
In the North trial, there was zero evidence about race. There was never a suggestion about race. The case started as a race-based case, but the trial had zero to do with race. Zero.
What was the race of the jurors?
If I remember correctly, we had 2 African-American jurors, if not 3. That's terrible. If they're watching, they're going to be mad at me. I know we had at least 2 African-American jurors. We had a good split of men and women, older men and older women, by and large. But we had 2 African-Americans on the jury.
Why should they be mad at you? It shows that race isn't a big deal to you. That's not a bad quality.
And as I was trained by my father, who Greg recalls my father, one of the things he taught me as a trial attorney is you pick the jury. They're certainly there to make a decision in your case, but you try a case as if they're not even there. Your attention is to the witnesses and to the judge. It's not to the jury. I'm not one of these lawyers that kowtows to the jury.
Plays to the jury.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next step is before trial. What happens? Oh, you know what I wanted to ask you is, those of us who aren't legal professionals, we always hear on the news somebody has been indicted, but in this instance, a warrant was issued. When is an indictment issued versus a warrant? What's the procedure and how is it determined?
So in Connecticut state courts, there is no such thing as an indictment. There's no such thing as a grand jury. A warrant is obtained if a warrant, which is a statement of facts, is signed off by an officer who writes the warrant, a prosecutor who signs the warrant, and then ultimately a judge who signs the warrant. Once a judge finds probable cause by placing his or her signature on the warrant is active. Once that warrant is served, there's an official case. Indictments are really only used, at least in Connecticut, on the federal side, where there are grand juries. In that case, there's between 16 and 23 grand jurors who listen to evidence presented by a prosecutor. If a majority of those grand jurors determine probable cause exists, then a federal indictment for federal charges would follow.
Right. And so there's a court hearing of some sort in early June. What's going to happen then? And what's the rest of the procedure after that?
So that's his first appearance in court. The first appearance in court is more of the lawyer filing his appearance in the case, sort of a discussion with the presiding judge about, Judge, this is in chambers. Here's basically our positions. I'm sure they're going to be back and forth to court a number of times. That first couple court dates are more ceremonial than anything else. After that first court date, where typically a not guilty plea is entered, that then starts the prosecutor's responsibilities to exchange all the discovery. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discovery, so his lawyer's going to need a lot of time to go through it, and then he's going to have to consider experts and whatnot. By the time you get through all the evidence, you speak to and then subsequently retain experts. It could be 9 months to a year. And then during that period of time, I'm sure that the Inspector General will be making an offer, as all prosecutors do, whether you ask for one or not, you're going to get an offer. Officer Magnano will consider that offer. If he wants to reject it, one day he'll walk into court and say, I reject it. I want my trial. So there's a long, long way to go.
Well, speaking of the time frame, I saw James Riccio, who's the Hartford Police Union chief or director, whatever his title is, and I forgot the exact
President.
What president. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and he's a lieutenant in the police department. Although everybody calls him a sergeant, he doesn't seem to mind that much. I remember we talked about that, but I forget the exact duration. But it was something like he was saying that. Usually for an inspector general's report, it takes about a year, but in this case, it took only a month or two. And his implication, obviously, was that therefore we shouldn't trust this report. Do either of you have an opinion about that?
Greg, I don't know your feelings on that. There's a lot of work that the inspector general is doing. The current inspector general has been on the job maybe for a little less than a year. And I know he was handed a lot of work when officer
there was a backlog.
Yeah, there was a backlog. Now I can't comment on how quickly the report came out. I can tell you this: at the end of the day, it's going to be the presiding judge who's going to keep a relatively close watch on this case and make sure that it doesn't take very long for it to come to its conclusion. I could tell you, just as an aside, and here again I'm talking about Brian North, one of the reasons that trial was tried a little quicker than probably the standard case is because there was a concurrent civil case, and we successfully, at least during the pendency of the criminal case, avoided this weird dichotomy of, you can maintain your right to silence in a criminal case, but if you maintain a right to silence in a civil case, it could be used against you. So there was a stay of the civil proceedings, but only for a short period of time. The civil judge basically said, I'm not going to stay it any longer. And so we on the criminal side were like, all right, well, let's just try this now. And that's why it happened. If the civil case didn't exist, it might have been another year before Officer North had his trial.
But
They may run into the same thing.
Yeah, I think Officer Rakowski has a good point that, why with a backlog of deadly force cases does this one get pushed to the front and fast tracked? I mean, that was an unusually fast IG's report that came out. And I don't understand why it supersedes all the other deadly force cases that came before that.
Yeah, it's a good point, and you are right about that. I don't know if we'll ever know the answer to that question, but yeah, on balance, it takes a lot longer.
Yeah, I wasn't impressed with the IG's report, honestly, because some of the things are speculation, some of them are assumptions, and like I referenced with the race, it doesn't belong in there at all. There's no justification to bring that into an official report.
What about the warrant? Did either of you seen the warrant?
The warrant's included in the IG report.
It's incorporated in it. Okay.
No. It follows at the end of the IG's report. The IG's report is like 34 pages, and then there's the warrant.
Oh, okay. I hear you. So this is what James Riccio has to say about the warrant.
That warrant is absolute crap.
Oh. Not the most
well,
analysis,
but I do like this about James is that he's very blunt and he does not beat around the bush.
That's right. Well, he did give a couple of details about what was wrong with it. Let's listen to another clip.
Rachel Kane mentions de-escalation, how it wasn't done. It was done. She mentions that Officer Magnano should have hid or used non-lethal pepper spray in a lethal situation. Those aren't how we are trained.
Which is what you were saying, right?
He's not wrong. No.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a cool dude in a loose mood. For those of you who are interested in this case, might want to either go to our website or Rumble or YouTube and look up that episode.
Oh, with the interview of James and Von Klein?
Yeah.
I watched it, yeah.
Oh, you did? Oh, thanks. So I have one other question before we move on. Maybe Greg has more questions, but one of the things that Ben Crump said was that the sister, I think, was the one who called 911, and maybe she said it too, but the point was that she wanted an ambulance to come, not the police, or as Ben Crump pronounces it, ambulance, not the brightest guy in the world. And so is that significant? And can you tell us a little bit about, like, just in general, does a dispatcher have some discretion when somebody calls up and maybe they don't say which they want, or maybe they'll say they want an ambulance, but they'll decide it's appropriate for the police? How does that work?
They're going to follow the protocol of their training. If there's a weapon involved or it appears to be a dangerous situation, they're not going to dispatch an ambulance without dispatching police. And to go one step further, that ambulance is not even going to go near the house if he's standing by the front door with a knife in his hands. So the police are going to be there regardless, because the ambulance is not going to. The ambulance attendants will not try to make any attempt to approach a patient if they are armed and appear to be dangerous.
Yeah. So it has no legal significance, but it's sort of a human interest story. I mean, I think the sister is saying she wouldn't have called the police if she knew this was going to happen. Well,
no, because he was still going to have cut his wrist with a knife, and he wasn't going to get any medical attention until that knife was out of the scene.
Right.
And also, Ben Crump also accused the officer of unloading his clip, when in fact he fired 9 rounds, and I believe he had another 5 left in his weapon. So that's not true what he just stated.
All right, Ben Crump. What can we say about Ben? Hey, Frank, we have a segment called Has It Happened to Greg? And I would like to invite you to hang out with us while we do that, unless you have to go. We have a few more videos, not pertaining to this case, just various things, and we comment on it. You feel like hanging out with us for a few more minutes?
Sure.
Thanks,
All right.
Frank.
This is such a popular segment. We even have an intro for it. Buckle up, Frank. All right, this one might touch a raw nerve, and I'm really kind of curious about this. I want to make sure that I ask the question the right way, but let me just show the clip first.
Carolina, where two attorneys were shot outside a courthouse. Police say after a woman's civil case was thrown out, she returned to her car, retrieved a gun, and opened fire. Here's ABC's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, gunfire erupting outside a North Carolina courthouse where police say two attorneys were shot by a woman who had just had her civil case thrown out.
Downtown, you got a shooting, 300 Fayetteville, 300 Fayetteville. We got two victims over here in between in the alley.
Just heard a bunch of sirens.
It happened around 10:30 this morning in downtown Raleigh after police say the woman became belligerent during her court appearance. Police say the suspect left the building, drove back with a gun, and shot the lawyers who argued against her in court.
The suspect got out of the vehicle, approached the two victims, shot both victims, and that's when the deputies and the officers were able to take that suspect in custody.
Police tending to the two victims on the pavement and seen in video obtained by our station WTVD taking the suspect into custody on charges of attempted murder. The woman had been in court after a dispute with her neighbors who had accused her of making violent threats.
Aaron Katursky, thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Aaron. All right, so this kind of relates to both of your careers because Greg was a court officer. I think it was your first job in law enforcement in the New Haven courthouse. So one question is, what's the most violent thing you ever had to deal with as a court officer?
Well, I mean, because of the magnetometers at the entrances, that would not have happened inside the courthouse itself. So, scuffles, skirmishes, pushing, shoving, that type of stuff that we would break up. And sometimes if forced to make an arrest, other times it was just separate the combatants and walk them out of the building. But I've never seen it devolve into something that violent now.
Right. So the question I have for you, Frank, this is what I want to make sure I ask in a very delicate way, because I certainly don't want to give anybody any ideas. But it's no secret that attorneys play a rather integral role in the criminal justice system. And sometimes they, take sides that arguably they shouldn't, and the consequences are quite severe. And most attorneys, I don't think have any security or anything. Their offices are published. You don't hide. Are there any instances, or many? Here's one, but are there many other instances of attorneys being attacked? And is security a concern for you and for attorneys in general?
I've never had a concern personally. The courts that I visit, typically the three federal courts in Connecticut, as well as the state courts in Fairfield County, New Haven County, Hartford County, the security is very good. I can tell you I have seen over my 28 years of being a lawyer a couple of instances of defendants attacking their lawyers in the courthouse with their fists.
Their own lawyer.
Their own lawyer, yeah. And so, I mean, I have been present when there was a courthouse shooting, but it happened outside.
Right.
Is that Bridgeport?
The Bridgeport one at GA2 on Golden Hill Street. I was there when it happened. Which was crazy. And I didn't witness it. I was in the courtroom, but it was wild. But look, there are skirmishes, as Greg said, especially in these these bigger courthouses in the big towns and cities in Connecticut. There's fights almost routinely amongst the litigants or amongst the accused and the boyfriend or two witnesses to a case, but usually not involving the lawyers.
Right. But what about again, I don't want to give anybody any ideas, but like I said, where the lawyers work is public knowledge. What I would worry about if I were in your shoes is somebody showing up because they want you off the case or they want something to happen. They might threaten you, attack you. That doesn't happen.
Knock on wood, it's never happened to me. My particular office, I've been in the same location as my father was in the same location since the 1970s. So it's, in fact, my building says Riccio building on it, so they know where to find me if they want to. Listen, can you make everybody happy? No, but I think one of the things that a good attorney does is, even in the hardest of cases, whether you win or whether you lose, if your client believes that you did the best for them, they're never going to be angry. Are they going to be upset with the result? Absolutely. But they're never going to be angry at you. They're angry at the lawyers who clearly show that the lawyer did not do his or her job. They're not defending that person properly. So, I attack every case the same way, and I've never had a problem with someone coming after me because I did a bad job. Yeah, they lost the trial, and they're mad at me for the result. Well, let's sit down and talk about why that is.
Right. And it doesn't really happen to other lawyers either, so far as you know. This is not a thing.
Yeah, so far as I know, no, it's not a thing. No.
Right. All right, let's take a look at another video. This is a cop got trapped in a car with the suspect.
California wild video of an officer getting trapped inside a getaway car with a robbery suspect. You can see the vehicle slamming into a grocery store. Minutes later, police arrive on the scene. An officer tries to stop the man, but gets knocked inside the car as the driver peels away. After refusing to pull over, police say the officer shot the suspect in the leg. He crashed into a parked car before running away on foot. Authorities eventually caught up and arrested him. The suspect has pleaded not guilty to felony charges.
Aha, he shot him in the leg. You see, it can be an effective tactic if you're right next to him.
That was probably the only thing he could get his weapon trained on at that point, was his leg.
It's dangerous based on, how he's driving, but you got to admit he was well positioned to make an arrest, I guess.
I wouldn't recommend that as a tactic, is to get inside the bad guy's car. I don't think that's ever taught in any academy.
Well, I won't ask if that's ever happened to you, because it probably has never happened to anybody. But
no.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on then. Here is a good example of why I moved out of Los Angeles.
PD working to counter what they call a health and safety hazard.
Officers, they were called to a homeless encampment just west of downtown LA. Items were blocking the sidewalk and the encampment was crawling with rats. Officers made several arrests, issued multiple citations. Officers say encampments like this are dangerous because they make it impossible for people to use the sidewalk safely, especially people with disabilities.
I don't think I could last 1 hour on the streets at night, let alone be homeless on an ongoing basis. And on top of that, having rats crawling all over the place.
Jeff, I'm going to go out on a limb and make a wild guess that didn't happen overnight. That was weeks in the making. That was ignored and overlooked until it got to the point where it was impossible to ignore it.
Yeah. Well, there's rats all over, and there's feces all over, and, it's just, it used to be, well, you got to feel sorry for the homeless, because the stereotypical image in the minds of many people was that these are just people who, they have jobs even, they live in their cars, and I'm sure there are people like that, and they get counted as among the homeless, and that's fine to count them. But that's not what the problem is. This is the problem, and it's all over the place. Can you imagine going in? I mean, you've been out of police work for many years. You never had to deal with this, but can you imagine, you had your reasons for going into the law enforcement profession. Can you imagine having to deal with this all the time instead of, normal law and order matters?
It was bad enough going into some of these apartments or homes that were crawling with roaches. I mean, that was disturbing enough. But not to the point where you can actually watch rats run around. I mean, that's like the next level.
Yeah. What's it like in Bridgeport, Frank? As I said, I'm from Connecticut. I kind of know what Bridgeport's like, but what's it like nowadays? I don't know what your neighborhood is like or where you live, but
I don't live too far from Bridgeport, but I was born and raised in Bridgeport. Mm-hmm. And, Bridgeport has had some ups and downs. Right now, it's in an upward trajectory. There are these ideas that Bridgeport is dirty and crime ridden. Listen, any big city in any state is going to have its share of crime. Crime, if you believe the statistics, is actually slightly down. But the mayor, Mayor Ganem, who was the mayor during the first, like in the 90s, when I would say it was the first time Bridgeport really started looking better, a lot more business, more industry. It's happening again. There's a lot more industry coming to Bridgeport. There's thousands of units of housing that are going up. So Bridgeport is on its way up, most definitely.
All right, glad to hear that. They still have Highlight there?
No, Highlights. How old are you?
Exactly.
Take a guess, Frank.
Well, if you're old enough to remember and have gone to Highlight, so I think Highlight's been gone probably for 25 years. The building is still there. They turned it into a Greyhound track. That's since closed, and now they're considering making it into either a casino or it might be like a soccer stadium. But the building's still there.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when Channel 8 news reporters didn't dress like this. That's how old I am. All right,
That's
we have
a new
one
phenomenon.
Yes, we have. For those of you who think we didn't show you enough gunfire in tonight's episode, let's take care of that right now. A little bit of a shootout.
Now to the horrific images tonight, the newly released police body camera video of a deadly police shooting in Chicago. Graphic images showing a driver pulled over for a seatbelt violation, opening fire and wounding an officer. Police firing back, unleashing 96 shots in 41 seconds. We have a warning here. This is difficult. Here's Alex Perez.
Tonight, an independent investigation underway after this traffic stop turned deadly. Chicago police body camera video capturing the incident that ended with officers firing a barrage of bullets, killing 26-year-old Dexter Reed. Police say Reed fired first.
Roll the windows down.
The ordeal unfolding just after 6 p.m. March 21st. Reed in the driver's seat of his white SUV, surrounded by 5 plainclothes tactical officers, guns drawn, who initially pulled him over for not wearing a seatbelt and can be heard yelling commands at Reed.
Unlock the doors now.
In the video, Reed appears to ignore those commands.
Open the door now.
That's when Reed, investigators say, fired at officers, striking this officer, according to authorities, in the wrist. The officers scatter and immediately return fire. 4 officers unloading 96 rounds in 41 seconds. During the gunfire, Reed exits the vehicle and falls to the ground and appears to be shot multiple times. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson today.
Shooting a police officer can never be condoned. And we also have to be very clear that we hold our police to the highest of standards.
Reed, at the time of the incident, was facing charges for allegedly carrying a gun into a street festival. His mother, heartbroken.
They killed him. They killed him. They killed him.
And David, authorities say a gun was recovered from the front seat of Reed's vehicle. Those officers are now on administrative leave as that independent investigation is conducted. David?
Alex Perez reporting from Chicago tonight. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. So I guess as long as it's clear that the guy in the car was the first to fire his weapon, that to me seems like an open and shut case. What do you guys say?
Well, there's no convincing me that 5 plainclothes police officers pulled over that car because of a seatbelt violation. I don't want to say it was a pretext stop, but they're stopping that car because they have information that person is armed and dangerous, and they're using the seatbelt violation as a reason to pull that car over. But there's no way 5 plainclothes police officers are pulling over a car for a seatbelt violation. Not in Chicago.
And you're saying the tell, so to speak, is because there were 5 cops on it?
5 cops that aren't in uniform doing traffic enforcement, yes.
Oh, all right. So we can rule out that they didn't join the chase after they were on it from the beginning, you're saying?
Sounds like it, yeah. I mean, it looked like the people that are giving the commands were all out of uniform, so I have to assume those are the plainclothes officers.
And is that kosher, what you're saying?
Well, there's nothing illegal about it, but I don't believe that the reason they were pulling that car over was because they were enforcing seatbelt violations that day. I believe
Okay.
they targeted that car because they had information that he was probably armed. And I don't know, did they mention that he had an outstanding warrant or that he had charges pending for a firearm?
What, do you expect me to pay attention? What,
Well, no, that's okay. But what I'm going to say is they probably
just-
had developed information from an informant or whatever that he was carrying a firearm on him at that moment, and they decided they
Well,
would
they
pull
said
him
something
over.
at the very end about that. Here, I'll play it again.
Yeah.
And David, authorities say a gun was recovered from the front seat of Reed's vehicle. Those officers are now on administrative leave as that independent investigation is conducted. David?
Alex Perez reporting from Chicago tonight. Thank you, Alex.
And I think they said something earlier on that they were investigating, and I don't recall now. I think
In 41 seconds. During the gunfire, Reed exits the vehicle and falls to the ground and appears to be shot multiple times. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson today.
Shooting a police officer can never be condoned. And we also have to be very clear that we hold our police to the highest of standards.
Reed, at the time of the incident, was facing charges for allegedly carrying a gun into a street festival. His mother...
There you go.
Yeah. So he was facing charges for a firearm. Yeah.
Okay. Any thoughts, Frank?
You know, from a legal perspective, the question is whether the officer's use of deadly force was reasonable and justified. It sounds like the victim was the one that fired first, so it seems like they have reason to use deadly physical force, combined with training experience and all the other things. You know, the entire picture has to be drawn, but the initial analysis of whether deadly physical force was reasonable, well, I think the answer is yes, given that it was the victim that started with deadly physical force.
Which is pretty much what my hunch was, as long as they're sure he was the one to shoot first. It's hard to tell from the video, but I guess there's a way of determining that. All right. Well, thanks, Frank.
Jeff, if there's evidence that his gun was fired, then you could pretty much guarantee he fired first. He didn't start firing. He didn't start firing his gun because they were firing at him. Let's put it that way.
Right. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, we flashed your contact info on the screen before. Let's do it again, Frank. So we referred to you as a criminal defense lawyer. Maybe there are other areas of practice. You want to tell us a little bit more about the type of cases you handle?
Sure. By and large, my practice is mostly criminal defense. I call it a general practice. You know, I could do a little personal injury law here and there, but over my 28 years, I've refined it to criminal law. So I do, 99% of my firm is state and federal criminal defense.
All right. What have you ever figured out what percentage of cases you win?
Well, in state court or in federal court, I've won cases in federal court too. That's a whole nother podcast talking about those cases. But, I've won my share of jury trials in federal court. If I had to break it down in state court, I probably won at least 50% of my jury trials in state court.
Is that a good average compared to other lawyers?
Listen, if I was playing baseball, I'd be in the Hall of Fame.
All right.
Frank, the fact that you can win any trial in federal court is an accomplishment because the U.S. Attorney's Office is very selective in the cases that they bring to trial.
Very true. And in fact, I'll leave you with this. I won 2 federal cases in a row back in the mid-2010s, and I felt as though I was under investigation after that happened.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, you mentioned at least twice what would be a whole nother podcast. Obviously, you're hinting you want to come back, to which I say, all right, you talked us into it. We'd love to have you back anytime. So can we call upon you if there's a topic that seems to be in your wheelhouse?
Absolutely.
All right. And vice versa, if you have anything going that you want some publicity for and you want to speak to the public, let us know.
Thank you, Frank. You were a perfect guest for this segment because I as soon as I realized that we were going to talk about this particular case, I said, well, who would have excellent insight into this type of case would be Frank Riccio.
Well, I appreciate that. And I was happy to join and talk on this, and let's see how that case goes.
All right. And thank you, Greg, for the suggestion. You deserve all the credit. Tomorrow night is Wednesday night, and we'll be on at 7 p.m. with Scott Ritter for Ask the Inspector. And then Thursday night, our guest is Alex Reportify, who is a political analyst. He has a lot of economic expertise as well. He's from Canada, and he lives in China now. And my co-host, Ryan Milton, just got back from China, so that should be interesting. Also, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and we will be back next Tuesday night at 7. Thanks for watching, everybody. We love you. Nighty-night.
I'm too sexy for my shirt. Too sexy for my shirt. So sexy it hurts.